Hello, and welcome to a special episode of Marketplace Tech's limited series, Decoding Democracy. I'm Marketplace Senior Washington Correspondent Kimberly Adams. Today, we'll be talking about the misinformation that's come out online in the wake of the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump, which have largely centered around the shooter, now confirmed to be 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks. We'll also discuss how you should take in and respond when misinformation appears after a shooting event like this. A lot of misinformation appeared online in the hours after the shooting and in the absence of having verified information about Thomas Crooks or his motivations. So to get a sense of what kinds of misleading narratives were popping up, we spoke with Molly Dwyer, Director of Insights at PeakMetrics, a data firm specializing in online narrative threats. Here are some of the kinds of misinformation she's seen.
When we go to look at the actual buckets of the conspiracy theories, we see everything from the claim that it was a false flag operation orchestrated by President Trump to, boost his success in the election, to the opposite end of that it was a targeting by the deep state to stop President Trump in this election. So when you take a look at it from those perspectives, you really see how it can bubble up from and then reinforce existing biases within internet users. I would say specifically, there were claims trying to track down other videos or other quotes from the shooter. I think because the shooter did not have a clear manifesto online, it led to a number of folks looking for a clear explanation of who might this person be. On the other side of that, you had claims that this was Antifa and a false name and photo circulating around claiming that this was an Antifa shooter. You also had claims even that the Chinese were responsible for it before they had identified a photo of the shooter as a white male. Even further within the conspiracy theories, I would say the latest thing that we're seeing really gain traction online is folks trying to make sense of how the Secret Service could have really failed in this job so monumentally to have allowed this to happen. I think people are naturally looking for an explanation, so thinking that it might have been an inside job because they can see law enforcement sort of watching this play out in real time in the videos that circulated online.
That was Molly Dwyer at PeakMetrics. So there was a lot of misinformation emerging right after this shooting, a crucial period of time for people trying to make sense of a terrible, violent incident. Understanding how to take in and respond to a flood of misinformation that can follow situations like this is super important. And so to help us talk through that, I'm joined now by Dr. Lisa Fazio, Associate Professor of Psychology at Vanderbilt University, specializing in mitigating the effects of false information. Dr. Fazio, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So in the moments after a shooting event like this, how can people tell what's real and what isn't?
Yeah, anytime we have a critical event like this, you're going to see a lot of false information in the aftermath. And so it's really important to rely only on kind of reliable findings from people on the ground, from news media, where this isn't just a rumor, this isn't just what we think might have happened, this is verified information.
Why is it so important to have verified information about incidents like this right after it happened, as well as later on in the days and weeks to come?
Yeah, I think it's important for us to have kind of a consensus foundational understanding of what these events are, why they happened, things like that. So it's important for people to have accurate information, but it's also important to know that you're never going to get the full story in the first couple of hours. It takes time to figure out why these events happened, what exactly happened, and anything that you're hearing in the first few hours afterwards is unlikely to be the full story.
What stood out to you about the types of misinformation that were floating around after this attempted assassination, especially in comparison to some of the other narratives we've heard during the campaign?
One of the interesting things in the aftermath of this event was that people at different ends of the political spectrum came up with completely different stories of what happened and why it happened. And so it was a really clear example of how people want to understand the world around them and do that in the perspectives that they have and their beliefs and ideology. So people who want Trump to be president viewed the event in one way and found evidence for that that story, while people who don't want Trump to be president came up with different stories and different pieces of evidence.
What advice would you give people who are trying to parse information in the immediate aftermath and trying to figure out what information they can verify and what information they can't?
I think one important question is, do you really need to know the answer right now? Can you just wait 24 hours and see what we know then? I think we've been conditioned to think that we need to be up to the minute, knowing exactly what's going on. And a lot of times in these crisis situations, the best thing you can do is just check out of the story and come back the next day and see, what do we actually know? Because it might not seem harmful to be exposed to all of these false rumors and pieces of misinformation, but we actually know that the more often you see this stuff, the more you think it might be true. And so it can have real effects if you kind of immerse yourself in this sea of misinformation.
We've talked quite a bit on Decoding Democracy about how to talk to friends and family who may have been exposed to misinformation. Using this event as an example, do you have any advice for people who want to talk to the people around them about maybe some of these false narratives that they're absorbing?
Yeah, I think one advantage we have in this case is because it's a recent event, it's easier to shift people's belief because it was just formed. It's still kind of malleable. Whereas things like the 2020 election, at this point, people are so firmly held, some people in their false belief that the election was stolen, that it's going to be really hard to convince them. But false narratives about this event that just happened are going to be easier to shift. And so we've already seen that while immediately there was a bunch of talk about this being a false flag operation, as more evidence has come out, people have kind of abandoned that narrative and moved on to trying to figure out what the motive of the shooter was and things like that.
Well, thank you again for your insights, Professor, and thank you for joining us.
Of course.
That was Dr. Lisa Fazio at Vanderbilt University. Thank you all for joining us on this special episode of Decoding Democracy. If you have any stories you'd like to share, we would love to hear from you. So leave a comment below. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe. Daniel Shin produced this episode, and I'm Kimberly Adams.